Part 1. The breaking point. The cold hospital room smelled sterile and faintly of antiseptic. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their harsh glow making everything feel even more lifeless. I was lying in the bed, motionless except for the occasional twitch of my hand, the thin hospital blanket clinging to me like a second skin. My mind was numb, and my body felt as if it were not entirely my own. The pain was there, but it wasn't just physical. The memory of the accident still haunted me, of the mine collapse, of the screams, the chaos, the darkness that had seemed to swallow everything whole. I had fought to survive, but in the end, what had I really survived for? For a marriage that had been nothing but a facade, for a man who never truly saw me, for a child I would never hold again. And then, she came into the room. I didn't need to turn my head to know it was her. Brooke. The woman who had torn my world apart. She stood in the doorway, her presence as cold and calculating as the steel in her eyes. Lily, her daughter, stood beside her, clutching a bouquet of lilies, her face a picture of fake innocence. As they walked toward me, I could feel the tension in the air, thick, heavy, suffocating. "Miss Rachel," Lily said in that sweet, practiced voice of hers. She was barely 8 years old, but she spoke like she had learned the art of manipulation from her mother. "Daddy Logan is with my mommy celebrating right now. Can't you just get over yourself and stop ruining their good time?" My heart sank. I stared at Lily, my lips parting in shock. The words that spilled from her mouth, so casually and with such venom, sent a wave of rage through my veins. I wanted to say something, anything, to put her in her place. But the words died in my throat as she continued, twisting the knife further. "I want a baby brother too, you know," she added, her voice almost too sweet to be real. "Do you really think flirting with a few random men will make Daddy Logan jealous enough to come back to you? Don't kid yourself. You're just my mom's stand-in. The only reason Daddy married you was because you look a little like her." The words felt like a slap to my face, but it was the next part that made my blood run cold. She lifted her chin proudly, the smile on her face wicked. "Oh, do you like my pearl necklace? Pretty, right? Daddy Logan bought it for me. Mommy has one too. Just look at you, so pathetic. Do you know what Daddy Logan says about you behind your back? He says you're uneducated, tacky, and in the way. He said it'd be best if you and your baby just died together." I froze, unable to speak. The betrayal, the cruelty of it all, cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I felt my heart shatter. But just as I was about to explode, a voice interrupted. "Enough." Logan's voice was cold and dismissive, and I felt my stomach turn at the sight of him standing in the doorway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face like stone. But there was nothing in his eyes. No warmth. No recognition. Just indifference. "Lily's only 8 years old," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Why are you nitpicking with a child?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could he be so dismissive? Our child had just died, and here he was, shrugging it off like it was a trivial matter. My mind went numb. All I wanted was for him to show some sign of care, some acknowledgement of the pain we were both suffering, but instead, he was more concerned about how this was inconveniencing him. "I'm tired, Logan," I finally managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't recognize you anymore." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him everything that was wrong with this marriage, everything that was wrong with him. But before I could get another word out, he turned on his heel and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with Brooke and her daughter. Lily's eyes glowed with triumph, her cruel little smile widening as she saw the effect her words had on me. But I was too drained, too empty to react. I felt nothing anymore. Brooke followed after Logan, but before she left, she turned to me one last time, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You really should stop trying to keep him," she said, her tone almost like a warning. "You're just in the way. You've never been what he wanted." And just like that, they were gone. I was left in that sterile room, my heart bleeding in silence. But something in me snapped. I could feel it, the rage, the hurt, the bitter cold realization that I had wasted so much of my life on someone who never truly cared. I had spent so many years holding on, hoping that things would change, hoping that Logan would one day see me. But now, I understood the truth. He had never loved me. I had been nothing more than a placeholder, a replacement for the woman he truly wanted. My hands clenched into fists. I was done. But that was only the beginning of everything that would come next. Part 2, the unraveling. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, drifting between numbness and fury. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Logan's face, his cold indifference, the way his eyes never seemed to focus on me, the way he treated me like a ghost. I had been the dutiful wife, always waiting for him to come home, taking care of his every need, loving him despite his distance, his dismissiveness. I had given him everything. And for what? To be discarded like a used tissue? The hospital room was silent, too quiet. I couldn't even hear the usual bustle of nurses and patients outside my door. My mind raced as I tried to process everything that had happened. But one thought kept coming back: I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't stay in this marriage, in this life, where I was nothing more than an afterthought. As I stared at the blank ceiling, the door creaked open. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Rachel. Dennis's voice was steady, like the rock I had come to rely on during the past few days. He had been by my side since the mine collapse, through the pain, the uncertainty, the endless questions. He was there when the doctors told me I had lost the baby, when they told me I might never have children again. And through it all, Dennis had remained a constant, a silent support, a friend who never faltered. I turned to him, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something. Not hope, not yet, but something like warmth. Dennis, I whispered, the sound of his name feeling foreign on my lips. He stepped closer to the bed, his eyes searching mine. His face was weary, and the exhaustion in his eyes mirrored my own. He was one of the few people I could trust now, but even with him, there was a question lingering. Would he, too, betray me like everyone else? I'm here, he said softly. I don't know what Logan said, but I'm telling you, you don't deserve any of this. You're stronger than you think. I blinked back the tears that had threatened to fall all day. Stronger? If I were strong, I wouldn't have stayed with him for so long. I wouldn't have let him use me, take advantage of my love for him. But then again, maybe it was that love, that foolish hope, that kept me going. Do you think it's possible to love someone who never really loved you back? I asked, my voice cracking. Dennis's expression softened. He sat down at the edge of the bed, his gaze never leaving mine. I think, sometimes, we convince ourselves that love is enough. But it's not, Rachel. Love isn't just about giving. It's about being seen, being valued. And if Logan never saw you, if he never appreciated you, then that's not love. That's something else. I swallowed hard, his words hitting me like a wave. Then why am I still so stuck on him? I whispered, more to myself than to him. Why can't I just let go? You're grieving, Dennis said quietly, his voice a little rougher now. You lost a child, Rachel. You're grieving a life you thought you'd have. And Logan, he just didn't care. He was never the man you needed him to be. I nodded, my heart aching with the weight of his words. The truth was harder to face than I had imagined. All these years, I had been holding on to a dream, a fantasy that wasn't real. I had been waiting for Logan to change, for him to wake up and realize what he had in me. But he never would. He never had. Are you going to stay with me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air between us, fragile and uncertain. Dennis didn't hesitate. Always. There it was. The answer I had been too afraid to ask for. But even as his words sank in, a part of me resisted. He wasn't my husband. He wasn't Logan. And there was still a part of me, deep down, that wanted Logan to be the man I needed him to be. But deep down, I also knew that dream was dead. I couldn't stay in this cycle any longer. I had to make a choice. A real choice. Suddenly, the door opened again, this time with more force than necessary. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. Logan. His face was a mask of anger, his eyes hard as he stormed into the room. The moment he stepped inside, I could feel the tension rise, thick and suffocating. Dennis stood up, his stance protective. But I didn't feel the need to be protected anymore. Not from him. What do you want? I asked, my voice cold. Logan's eyes flickered, a mixture of disbelief and frustration crossing his face. I'm here to talk, Rachel. To fix this. I couldn't help but laugh. The sound was bitter, full of pain. Fix this? After everything you've done? You abandoned me. You abandoned our child. You were never there for me, Logan. You don't understand, he snapped, his voice rising. I was trying to protect you. You don't know what I've been dealing with. I stood up then, fury flooding through me. No. You were never trying to protect me. You were too busy with your precious Brooke to even care about what was happening at home. You left me to deal with everything. And now, you have the audacity to stand here and pretend like you care? Logan stepped back, taken aback by my outburst. For a moment, there was a flicker of something, regret, maybe, or guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by that familiar arrogance. You don't get it, Rachel, he said through gritted teeth. I married you out of obligation. I didn't want you. I wanted Brooke. She's the one who matters. Every word he spoke was like a slap, and I felt the sting of each one. I had known, deep down, that I was never truly loved by him. But hearing it from his lips, it tore me apart. Then why don't you just leave? I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. Why don't you just go be with her? You've already destroyed everything. You don't need to pretend like you're still trying to fix something that's already broken. Logan opened his mouth to say something, but Dennis stepped in between us, his voice cold and commanding. Logan, don't you dare. You've said enough. Logan glared at Dennis, but there was nothing he could say. He turned on his heel and left without another word. I sank back down into the bed, exhausted, my body aching with the weight of everything that had happened. Dennis sat down beside me again, his presence a quiet comfort in the storm. You're free now, Rachel, Dennis said quietly, his voice gentle. Free to start over. Free to live your life the way you deserve. I nodded, but the truth was, I wasn't sure what to do next. My life had been built around a lie. Everything I had known was shattered. But Dennis was right, this was the moment to let go. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be painless. But it was the only choice I had left. And as the days passed, I started to see that maybe, just maybe, I could build something new from the wreckage of my past. But first, I had to make the hardest choice of all. I had to face the truth, and once I did, there was no going back. Part 3. Breaking free. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. The silence in my house, the absence of Logan's presence, was deafening. My home had once been filled with his voice, his demands, his indifference. Now, it was empty, save for the echo of my own thoughts. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt lost. I stayed in the hospital for a few more days, just long enough for my body to recover from the trauma of the miscarriage. But it wasn't just my body that needed healing, it was my heart, my soul. I was a shell of the woman I used to be, unsure of who I was without Logan, without the life I had spent so many years building with him. But I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to move forward. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't keep denying it. I had given everything to Logan. I had sacrificed my happiness, my dignity, and my future for a man who had never truly cared about me. He had used me to climb the ranks, to satisfy his own selfish needs, and in the end, he had discarded me without a second thought. But I was done. Done with being his doormat. Done with putting up with his lies, his betrayal. It was time for me to reclaim my life. Dennis had been there for me when no one else was. He had held my hand through the darkest moments, never once asking for anything in return. He had stood by me, even when the whole world seemed to be against me. But even with his unwavering support, there was still a part of me that felt guilty. He wasn't the man I was supposed to be with. He was my friend, my confidant, but nothing more. Still, his words had stayed with me, "You're stronger than you think." I hadn't believed them at first. But now, as I sat alone in the sterile hospital room, I realized he was right. I had survived a collapse in the mine. I had survived the loss of my child. And I was still standing. That was strength. The following week, I returned home to a place that felt like a stranger's house. The furniture was the same, the pictures on the walls unchanged, but everything felt different. Every corner of the house reminded me of the life I had lived, the life that was now in ruins. I didn't even bother unpacking my bags. There was no point. Everything I had known was gone, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to keep it. The first thing I did was go into the study. Logan's study. The room he had spent so much time in, the room where he had made all his decisions. I had never been allowed in here. He had always kept it locked, as if it was some kind of fortress for his secrets. But now, I had no reason to fear it. I had nothing left to lose. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the smell of old leather and dust filling my nose. The room was exactly as I remembered it, neatly organized, everything in its place. Logan's bookshelves lined the walls, his desk was perfectly arranged, and the chair behind it was still angled at a precise angle, as if he were going to sit down any minute. But he wasn't coming back. And I wasn't going to let him haunt me anymore. I walked over to his desk, my fingers brushing against the surface. It felt like I was touching his life, his world, his lies. I opened the drawers, one by one, searching for something, anything, that could give me closure. But everything was as sterile as the room itself, bills, old documents, work files. Nothing that mattered. Nothing that explained why he had treated me the way he had. But then, in the back of one drawer, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a small notebook, well-worn, the pages yellowed with age. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling. The first page was filled with words, Logan's handwriting. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a list. But as I read on, I realized what it was. It was a list of women. His affairs, his secret rendezvous, all recorded in painstaking detail. The names of the women he had been with, the dates, the times. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how many times my name appeared on the list, Rachel, the woman who had always been there, the woman he had used as a shield while he indulged in his affairs. The pages went on for what seemed like hours, but the truth was clear, I had never been his priority. I was just the woman he had married out of convenience, the one he could use to make his life look good, to maintain his reputation. But in the end, he had betrayed me. He had betrayed us both. I closed the notebook, my hands shaking. The anger that had been simmering inside me finally boiled over. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn everything he had ever touched. But most of all, I wanted to make him pay for what he had done. But that wasn't the person I was anymore. The old Rachel would have cried, begged for his love, tried to fix things. But that Rachel was gone. This new version of me, the one standing here, shaking with rage but standing tall, was someone different. I was done being a victim. I walked out of the study and into the living room, where Dennis was waiting for me. He looked up as I entered, his eyes full of concern. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at him, really looked at him. He had been there when no one else had. He had stayed when I was falling apart. But now, I wasn't sure where to go from here. I'm done, I said, my voice steady. I'm done with Logan. I'm done with the lies, the betrayal. I'm done living a life that isn't mine. And I'm done letting him control me. Dennis stood up, his eyes searching mine. What are you going to do? I met his gaze, my heart pounding. I'm going to take back what's mine. I'm going to fight for my future, for my life. And I'm going to make sure Logan pays for everything he's done. Dennis nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Then let's do it. It was the first time in weeks that I felt a sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do. I had to take control of my life again. And this time, there would be no turning back. Part 4. The reckoning. The days that followed felt like an unrelenting storm. I had made my decision. There was no turning back now. I would not let Logan's lies and betrayals define my future. This time, I would fight. I would fight for justice, for what was rightfully mine, and most importantly, for my own peace of mind. The first step in this battle was to gather evidence. I knew Logan would never admit to his wrongdoings willingly. He had a talent for twisting the truth, for manipulating situations to his advantage. But this time, he was dealing with someone who had nothing left to lose. This time, I wasn't going to be a passive observer in my own life. I reached out to Dennis, who immediately understood my urgency. He had the connections, the resources, and the determination to help me take down Logan once and for all. He had his own reasons for wanting to bring Logan to justice, and his loyalty to me only fueled his resolve. Dennis brought in a team of investigators, discreetly combing through every financial record Logan had ever touched. It wasn't just the affair that needed to be exposed, it was his crimes, his theft, the ways in which he had used his position to exploit the system. We had to ensure that there was no escape for him, no way for him to wriggle out of the consequences of his actions. Logan had stolen from the national mine, a betrayal of both his job and his country. It was a crime that carried serious repercussions, and now that we had the evidence, there was no way he could deny it. Every penny he had spent on his mistress, every luxury he had flaunted, came from stolen funds. The proof was irrefutable. But even as we gathered the evidence, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was this revenge? Or was it justice? No, I told myself. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protecting myself, about making sure no one else suffered the way I had. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I was doing it because I refused to let him continue to live his life without facing the consequences. I still couldn't believe how far Logan had gone. He had convinced himself that everything he had done was justified. He had convinced himself that I was the problem, that I had somehow been the one to ruin everything. But the truth couldn't be denied anymore. It was clear who the real villain was in this story. I met with Dennis one afternoon, in a small, dimly lit cafe that was far from the watchful eyes of our enemies. I couldn't risk anyone seeing us together, especially Logan and his cronies. I think we've got enough to go after him, Dennis said, his voice low and steady. We've traced his spending, we've found the discrepancies in his salary, and we've got the witness testimony from some of the people in the mine. They're willing to testify against him. All we need is the right moment to strike. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. What's the plan? Dennis leaned in, his eyes locking with mine. We go public. We expose him for everything he's done. We'll hand over all the evidence to the authorities, and we'll make sure the press knows the truth. There's no way he'll be able to talk his way out of this one. I took a deep breath, my hands clenched tightly around my coffee cup. This was it. There was no turning back now. Make it happen, I said, my voice steady despite the fear that threatened to choke me. It's time. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late-night strategizing. We prepared everything meticulously, every piece of evidence, every witness statement. Nothing was left to chance. We were going to make sure that Logan could not escape the consequences of his actions. And then, the day came. I had no idea what to expect when the news broke. I didn't know how Logan would react, what his next move would be. All I knew was that he had made his choice, and now I was making mine. The news hit like a storm. The authorities had arrested Logan Miller, the former company commander, for embezzling funds from the national mine. The press was all over it, publishing article after article detailing his crimes, the stolen money, the luxurious lifestyle he had funded with his ill-gotten gains. And then came the revelation that shocked everyone. Logan had been having an affair with a woman named Brooke, a woman who had been living in luxury while his wife, Rachel, had been left to suffer. But it didn't end there. The authorities had also discovered that Logan had caused a workplace accident by abandoning his post, leading to the tragic death of his child's unborn sibling. The truth was out in the open now, and there was no way for Logan to deny it. His career, his reputation, everything he had worked for, had crumbled in an instant. As the news spread, I sat at home, numb. I had waited for this moment for so long, and now that it had come, I didn't feel the victory I had expected. Instead, I felt a deep sense of emptiness. The man I had once loved, the man I had fought for, was gone. His lies had been exposed, but it didn't change the fact that I had been betrayed. The hardest part was knowing that I had to let go of the life I had once imagined with Logan. For so long, I had clung to the hope that things would change, that he would come back to me, that we could fix everything. But the truth was, there was no going back. It was over. Logan's arrest was just the beginning. As the days passed, more and more details came to light. The investigation into his financial dealings grew more complex, and the authorities began to uncover even more evidence of his corruption. Brooke, too, was implicated in the crimes, and her involvement with Logan's schemes became public knowledge. But Logan's downfall wasn't just about the money. It was about the lives he had ruined. The people he had betrayed, the trust he had broken. And in the end, it was those people, Dennis, the workers at the mine, the families that had been affected, that would rebuild their lives while Logan's world fell apart. I knew this would not be an easy journey. But I also knew it was the right one. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I had no more doubts. I was free. Part 5. The aftermath. The days after Logan's arrest passed in a blur. The world around me seemed to move in slow motion, while I found myself stuck in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't quite grasp. Logan's betrayal had shaken me to my core, but the truth was, I had known all along, hadn't I? Deep down, I had always suspected something wasn't right. Now, the lies were laid bare, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken life. Dennis was by my side throughout it all. He never wavered, always there when I needed him, his loyalty unshaken. He had witnessed firsthand the toll Logan's behavior had taken on me, and he was determined to make sure I was never alone again. But even as he offered his support, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything I had lost. I had loved Logan once. I had trusted him. And now, he was nothing more than a shadow in my past. As the weeks dragged on, Logan's trial began. The evidence was undeniable, and there was no escape for him. His crimes were too vast, too many to ignore. He was no longer the proud, commanding man I had once admired. He was a man broken, desperate to salvage what little dignity remained. I followed the trial from a distance. There were no more personal visits, no more pleading or promises of change. Logan had long since lost the right to my compassion. But there was something cold and final in seeing him dragged through the legal system, his every move scrutinized, his every lie exposed. The charges against him were grave. Embezzlement, corruption, abuse of power, and worst of all, his role in the tragic collapse at the mine. The evidence proved that it was Logan's decision to abandon his post that had led to the accident, a decision that ultimately cost us our unborn child. I had lived with that pain for so long, but seeing it validated in the courtroom, knowing that the loss had been entirely avoidable, stirred up feelings I had long buried. But there was something else, something deeper, that troubled me. The more I learned about Logan's life and his crimes, the more I realized how far his deception had gone. He had lived a double life for years, using his position and influence to manipulate others, all while portraying himself as a devoted husband and upstanding man. It was staggering to think about how many people he had hurt along the way, and I couldn't help but wonder if there were others like me, people he had used, discarded, and forgotten about. Yet, despite everything, there was a strange sense of closure that began to wash over me. The truth was out now, and Logan had no more power over me. I had taken control of my own narrative, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. But freedom didn't come without its costs. Dennis was there every step of the way, and as the trial neared its end, he became more than just my protector. He became my confidant, my anchor in the storm. I could see the care in his eyes, the way he always seemed to know when I needed him the most. But I wasn't sure where I stood with him. Did I feel the same way he felt for me? Or was it just gratitude, a fleeting sense of relief that he was the one who had stood by me when I needed it most? I had to admit, there was something comforting about his presence, something steady and reliable. He had never wavered, never faltered in his support. And yet, as much as I wanted to allow myself to lean on him, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't ready for a new chapter in my life just yet. The pain of losing Logan was still fresh, still too raw. I needed time. Time to heal. Time to rediscover who I was without him, without the life I had once imagined with him. It would take time to let go of the past and move forward, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my former marriage. The trial concluded with a verdict that no one had expected. Logan was convicted on all charges. The judge sentenced him to prison for his role in the embezzlement and his negligence at the mine. It was a devastating fall from grace for the once proud commander. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't feel any satisfaction. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to gloat. All I wanted was peace. Logan's downfall was a reminder that no one could outrun their past forever. In the end, no matter how much he tried to lie or manipulate the truth, the consequences of his actions caught up to him. But as his life crumbled, I found myself searching for something more, something that would help me move forward. The hardest part, I realized, was not the betrayal itself, but the loss of the person I thought I had known. The person I had loved so deeply. Logan wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't even the man I had fallen in love with. He was someone else entirely, a stranger I had allowed into my life. But even as the pieces of my past scattered around me, I began to see the possibility of a future, one that didn't include Logan, one that was solely mine to shape. I wasn't the same person I had been when I married him. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more aware of what I deserved. And in that realization, I found a small flicker of hope. But that wasn't the end of the story. There were still questions I had to answer. Questions about what came next, about what kind of life I wanted to build for myself now that I was free. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed support. I needed people I could trust. And slowly, over time, I began to rebuild the life I had lost. Part 6. A new beginning. The months following Logan's conviction were a whirlwind of change, both for me and for those around me. The dust had settled on the trial, but the aftermath continued to ripple through my life. Every day brought new challenges, new decisions, and a constant reminder that the world had shifted in ways I hadn't yet fully understood. I spent much of that time focused on reclaiming my independence, rediscovering who I was without Logan's shadow looming over me. It wasn't easy. Some days felt like I was walking through a fog, unsure of where I was headed, but with each step, I found myself becoming more confident in my choices. Slowly, I began to open my heart to the possibility of a future, though I wasn't sure what that future would look like yet. Dennis continued to be a constant in my life, but now, his presence felt different. It wasn't just about being my protector anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken. We spent more time together, and I began to realize just how much I valued his companionship. He was there for me when no one else was, and in his eyes, I saw a kind of sincerity I hadn't experienced before. I had heard the whispers, people speculated about our relationship, wondering if something more was developing between us. But I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I needed time to heal, to be sure of what I wanted before taking that leap. I couldn't let myself fall into something new out of desperation or loneliness. I needed to be whole again first. Dennis seemed to understand. He was patient with me, always there when I needed him but never pushing for more than I could give. It was one of the things I admired most about him, the way he respected my space, my pace. I knew he cared for me, but he never made me feel pressured. His support was unwavering, and in many ways, that was the greatest gift he could have given me. One evening, as we sat on the porch of the small house I had moved into after everything with Logan fell apart, Dennis turned to me, his face serious. "Rachel, I know this hasn't been easy for you. You've been through a lot, and I don't want to push you. But I need you to know something." I looked at him, sensing the weight in his words. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've always had your back. And I will continue to, no matter what. But I want you to know that I care about you, Rachel. More than just as a friend. I've been with you through this entire mess, and I'll be here for whatever comes next. I need you to know that." I felt a lump form in my throat, the sincerity in his voice catching me off guard. I had known for a while that Dennis had feelings for me, but hearing him say it aloud made everything more real, more complicated. My heart was conflicted, still raw from the wounds Logan had inflicted, and I didn't know if I was ready to open myself up to someone else just yet. "I appreciate that," I said softly. "I really do. But I'm not sure I'm ready for something more, Dennis. I need time. Time to figure out who I am, what I want." He nodded, his expression softening. "I get it. And I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready." His words gave me a sense of relief I hadn't expected. I didn't have to have all the answers right now. I didn't need to rush into anything. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own life, and that was a powerful feeling. As the seasons changed, I found myself starting anew in ways I hadn't thought possible. I began taking up old hobbies I had neglected, painting, reading, even gardening. Simple things that brought me joy, things that reminded me of who I used to be before the storm that had been Logan. I also reconnected with family and friends who had always supported me, but whom I had distanced myself from during my marriage. They welcomed me back with open arms, offering love and support as I rebuilt my life. I hadn't realized how much I had missed them until I allowed myself to lean on them once more. And then, one day, I received a letter. It was from a lawyer, and it sent a shiver down my spine when I saw the return address. Logan. I hadn't heard from him since the trial. I hadn't wanted to. But as I opened the letter, a sense of dread washed over me. The contents of the letter were short but clear. Logan had appealed his sentence. He claimed that the trial had been biased, that the evidence against him was fabricated, and that he was innocent of the charges. He requested a new trial, and he wanted me to testify on his behalf. I sat there, staring at the paper in my hands, unsure of what to think. Did he honestly believe I would come to his defense after everything he had done? After the betrayal, after the lies, after the way he had treated me? My heart twisted in anger at the thought of him trying to manipulate me once again. But then, something inside me shifted. A part of me, the part that had once loved him, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had changed. That maybe he had found some shred of remorse for what he had done. But that was a lie I couldn't afford to tell myself. Logan's actions had consequences, and no amount of pleading or manipulation could erase the pain he had caused. I didn't owe him anything. I had given him everything once, and he had thrown it all away. There was nothing left for him to take from me. I folded the letter, my hands trembling slightly as I did so. This was it. The last piece of the past I had to let go of. I would not testify for him. I would not give him the satisfaction of thinking he still had a hold on me. Dennis, who had been sitting nearby, looked at me with a silent question in his eyes. He had been quiet since I opened the letter, but I could tell he had been waiting for me to make up my mind. "You're not going to help him, are you?" he asked softly, his voice steady. I shook my head. "No. I'm done with him. He can't hurt me anymore." Dennis reached over and took my hand, his grip strong and reassuring. "Good. You don't owe him anything, Rachel. You deserve so much more than him." And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The final chapter of my life with Logan had come to a close, and now, I was free. Free to move forward, free to rebuild, free to live the life I deserved. As the days passed, I found myself growing stronger, more confident in the person I was becoming. Dennis remained by my side, not as a savior or protector, but as a partner. A true friend who had stood by me when I needed him most. One day, as we walked together through the park, I realized something. I wasn't just healing from the past. I was growing into the person I was always meant to be. And that, I thought, was the beginning of something beautiful.